We're learning the fourth Sikha of Parshas Balak in Chelek Yud on page 293. The Sikha is focused on the Haftarah of this week's Parsha, and the subject of the Sikha is the inyan of Bitachon. Much has been written about the subject of Bitachon, and the Rebbe Sikhas and the letters as well. In this Sikha, the Rebbe takes the inyan of Bitachon to a completely new level. The shir today is being learned Lila Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. The din is as the Haftarah from our Parsha Muzayin me inyan Parsha. So the halacha regarding the Haftarah is that the subject of the Haftarah that we read from the Psukim in the Nevi'im has to be somewhat similar to the subject that we speak about in the Parsha. Unachmer me'ein from the Msiyam Parsha. Even more, it's connected to the conclusion of the Parsha. Azayach, the Shaykhs from Parshas Balak, Mitir Haftarah, is l'chayra klare. The connection of the Haftarah of this week's Parsha of Balak to the Parsha is very clear. In the Haftarah werd erzählt, wie der Eibishter sagt zu Yidden. So in the Haftarah it says that the Eibishter tells Yidden as follows, Ami, my nation, Zechar na ma'yadz, Balak melech Moav. Remember what Balak, the king of Moav, advised to do. Huma ana yiseh Bilam ben Ba'er min Ashitim gaimer. And what did Bilam respond to him? Well, that's the Teichel from Parshas Balak. So this pasuk is speaking about what happened in this week's Parsha in Parshas Balak. That's why it's the Haftarah for the Parsha. As is aber move on, however it's understood, ubefrat al pia yidua, especially according to what it's known, as meikare is the Haftarah gekommen b'makom from the ganze kriyas Shabbos v'Yom Tov. The way the Haftarah was originally instituted was in a time when there was a decree that they weren't allowed to read from the Torah. So they instituted instead to read the Haftarah. So it took the place of the whole Kriya. As the Shaykhs zwischen der Haftarah mit der Sedre, so the connection of the Haftarah to the Parsha is nit blois in ein einzigen Pasuk. It's not only in one single Pasuk of the Haftarah, nor in your Teichen Klali. The general content of what the Haftarah speaks about is replacing the whole Parsha. Leita Yedua as a Teichen von an Inyan is merumiz in sein Aschole v'Reish. So it's known that the subject, or the content rather, of something is always hinted in the beginning of it. Is verstandig, as is da a Shaykhs zwischen Ascholas Haftarah. So there's a connection with the pasuk that there is in the beginning of the Haftarah, which is the pasuk V'hoya she'eris Yaakov bekerev amim rabim. There'll be the remnant of Yaakov, of the Yidden amongst all the nations. Asher lo yikav le'ish v'lo yiyachel v'nei Adam. And Yidden will not hope and will not look for any help from any other people. So this pasuk in the beginning of the Parsha is connected with Siyam Parshas Balak, with the Parsha of Balak, and specifically with the end, with the story that it says in the end of Parshas Balak. So let's take a closer look at the Haftarah in general, the whole Teichen of what time period is this Haftarah speaking about. The Haftarah read wegen dem Zman von Ascholas HaGeula. The Haftarah speaks about the time period at the end of Galus when it begins the time of redemption. Das heißt, meaning, the emphasis over here is Ascholas HaGeula, the beginning of redemption, nicht wegen dem Zman, wenn sie wird schon sein, Mashiach Vadai. Not after the time when Mashiach will be fully confirmed and revealed and active and complete his job in the world. Lachri wie wird verendigen alle Milcham, wie wird verendigen alle Milchames. Und epech alamim goyim elavdish chamechad, when all of the wars will be completed and all the nations of the world will be totally transformed to serve Hashem. Warum in der Haftarah wird erzählt, wie es wollen geführt werden Milchames mit die Amim. The Haftarah speaks about the wars that will be happening at that time with the different nations in the world, Umasaylam. And v'haya she'eris Yaakov b'gayim, and the remnant of Yidden will be amongst the Gayim ka'arye, bebehemis yar gayim, like a lion, amongst the animals or the beasts in the forest. V'ramas v'tarav gayim, and he'll attack them. So we see that the Haftarah describes a time period at the end of Galus when these wars are being completed. Nachmer, even more so we see in the Haftarah, nit nor wetten dem Zman HaMedubah b'Haftarah sein Rami b'chutz. The time that the Haftarah speaks about is not only a time period when there is evil, that it still exists on the outside, surrounding Eden, from the nations of the world that are persecuting them and so on, nor says nach faran Rami b'fnim. It's also a time period where there's still evil that exists from within, by Yidden Gufa, by the Yidden themselves. V'yerzakt, as the pasuk describes, v'chrati kshafim miyedecha goyme. Hashem says, I will cut away, I will get rid of the kishuv, of the sorcery amongst you. V'chrati pesilecha, I will destroy avodah zarah, the idols amongst you. V'netashti asherecha goymer, and I will also get rid of the asherah, which is also an avodah zarah tree. Und der Raz mit azat teikif, and it's a time period where the evil is still so strong, as midaf onkumen tzas to you amil maila b'chdei von impotet zu werden. That you need a special assistance from above to get rid of all of this evil here. The pasuk is medayik v'chrati v'natashti, that Hashem will destroy, Hashem will cut away all this evil that exists even amongst Klal Yisrael at this time period. Weil die Haftarah redt wegen dem Zman von Ascholas Agiyula. The Haftarah speaks about this time period, which is the beginning of redemption. Wenn es wollen sein, die letzte Achonis zu der Gula Shleima. At the conclusion of Galus, at the last moments, we have the last preparations for the ultimate redemption. That's the time period that the Haftarah speaks about. So now we can see that this is similar in the Parsha of the week in Balak. Azayich the Sedre, Parshas Balak. Red wegen an ähnlichen Zman speaks about a similar time period. Fahren an reinkommen in Eretz Yisrael zum ersten Mal. Before the Yidden enter into Eretz Yisrael the very first time. Yidden sind damals schon gewähnt bei Arvis Moav me'evel Yarden Yerechai. They were at that time at a place called Arvis Moav, right outside of Eretz Yisrael on the other side of the Yarden. Gereit an reinzugehen in Eretz Yisrael. Ready to enter into Eretz Yisrael. Bedugme to the Knisa Eretz Yisrael by the Gula Asida, similar to the time period when Yidden are making the last preparations to enter into Eretz Yisrael by the upcoming redemption. Ubefrat al Pia Yedua, and this is true, especially according to what it's known as al Malay Achet, if not for the fact that Yidden sinned at that time, volt by the Esh the Knisa Eretz Yisrael given the Gula Shleima. That first time they entered into Eretz Yisrael would have actually been the ultimate redemption. So the same time period that Haftarah speaks about, the ultimate redemption, is really in essence the position the Yidden were in at the time period that the Parsha and Parshas Balak speaks about. So now going back to the pasuk that Rebbe quoted before, what does the pasuk say regarding Yidden in this time period? The achane zu der Geula is, so the preparation for the redemption is as follows. We are zogt in Aschalas Haftarah, as the pasuk says in the beginning of the Haftarah. That Yidden do not hope or do not look to anybody, to any human being, for anything, for any salvation. They only hope to the Eibishter. So what is this pasuk speaking about? As we pointed out, we're speaking about a time period which is before the ultimate redemption has arrived. Von deswegen, nevertheless, wird sein de Seder, the approach of Yidden then will be, as man wird sich nicht darfen verlassen und nicht darfen ankommen zu Menschen. Yidden will not have to rely and will not have to come on to any help from any other people. But das ist keile lech Yidden, even relying on another Yid. Wie steht, as the pasuk says, Orer ha-gever asher yiftach ba'adam, cursed is the man that places his trust in another man. And what does this refer to? An atem kruyim adam, as the Gemara says, Yidden are the ones that have this name Adam, meaning that you're not even going to rely on another Yid. In this time period, Yidden preparing for the ultimate redemption will know that they have to rely on the Eibishter alone. Or as the pasuk says, Baruch hagever asher yiftach b'Hashem. Blessed is the man that places his trust only in the Eibishter alone. Vibalt, as der pasuk redt in dem Zman von Aschalas Agiyula. But now, since, as we've explained, this pasuk is speaking about at the last moments of Galus, when we're making the preparation for the beginning of redemption, is move on, so it's understood as medem v'sazocht lo yikav leish gaimer. The pasuk here says that you should not hope and place your trust in another man. Is the pasuk shaylol nit nor an haga sura? The pasuk here is not negating that a person should not act in a way which is prohibited, placing your trust in another person an haga heipachatayre, behaving in a way against and opposite of what Torah demands, regarding which the pasuk says that cursed is the man that places his trust in another man. That's something that's true in all times, in all of the times, even in Galus, that you never should place your trust in another man. When it comes here to this unique time period at the beginning of redemption, and the pasuk says that what's unique about this time period is that you're not going to trust any man, only the Eibishter alone, so this is something on a much greater level. Nor a fila anhage von yekavele ish was hot an art al piteide. even behaving in this manner, where you place your trust in another man, which according to Torah is acceptable, v'demot oichnit sein. In these last moments, when we come at the beginning, at the end of the Golus and the beginning of redemption, so here, even this level of trust, which is allowed and okay and accepted according to Torah, will not be either. And at this time period, we'll place our trust only in the Eibishter alone. So what are we speaking about over here? What is the level of trust that you place in another person that is completely forbidden? What is the level of trust that you can place in another person which is acceptable according to Torah? And in this time, by the Aschala of the Geula, even that, we will rise above that level and we will place our trust in the Eibishter himself. So the Rabbi gives a short introduction here. As Shteitach, the Pasuk tells us, that I will bench you in everything that you do, and your actions that you do. So what does this mean? And the Sifri touched this up, so the Sifri explains this to mean, a person might think that if I place my trust completely in Hashem, so I can just sit idly and do nothing, and wait for Hashem to come and take care of me. Talmud Laima, that's what this pasuk is teaching you. When will Hashem bench you? If you take action. That's where the bracha of Hashem comes. So what this means is, as al pi Torah, darf me machen a keli and derech hateva. The Torah itself is requiring and telling you that you should make a vessel, you should do something in nature, take action, that Hashem should come and bench you. And Chazal tell us, ein simchan al hanes. A person can't rely on miracles to happen. So therefore, since, as we can see within nature, you have to many times rely on another person to come and help you with things. And even to rely on another person, not a Yid. So therefore we understand that even according to Torah, it's acceptable to behave in this manner where you're placing trust, where you're relying on somebody else. This is part of the requirement of Torah. B'chol hashatasa. B'chol hashatasa means that nature Hashem created for a reason, and Hashem wants that we should make our effort according to nature, and therefore al pi Torah. Al pi Torah, this is acceptable. Yekavelish. Now, es ist nicht kein Stire davon zum Ansag, if so, you may ask the question, wait a minute, didn't we just say, cursed is the man that places his trust in another human being? So how can we say that at the same time that al pi Torah b'chol hashatase includes what's part of nature, trusting and relying on another person, and at the same time we say, cursed is a man that trusts another person? So the answer is, when a person is relying on someone, he makes a keli in teva, and through this keli of teva, the bracha of Hashem comes, is menit by teyach. What this means is, you're not relying and trusting of the darkei teva, yikavel ish mitzad atzma. You're not relying on the ways of nature, on the powers of nature, that this is the source of the blessing, that they independently have a power to give you whatever it is that you are relying on them for. Nor rather, mizbeteyach of the meibishn. A person trusts only in Hashem. As wird ihm helfen durch dem Keli levush was hat zugegräten derech hateva. That the Eibishter will help me through the garments or the vessels or the ways of nature that He, Hashem, has prepared for me. So of course a person realizes that the bracha comes from Hashem. But the bracha comes from Hashem, how? Through the ways and means of nature. And therefore, he's relying on another person to help him, but at the same time realizing that the source of the blessing comes from the Eibishter. This is the acceptable approach, according to Torah, that a person may rely on another person. So here comes the chiddush of this pasuk in the beginning of the Torah, in this time period of Geula, where the pasuk says, the pasuk there describes that the remnants of Yidden will exist and will get the bracha from the Eibishter, like the dew that comes from Hashem, from heaven. Which means as follows, as Rashi there says, the dew that comes down is not caused by any human being, and you don't even daven for this, because the dew is something that comes either way, summer, winter, and all time periods. And similar, the Yidden will not hope and turn to anybody for any assistance, only to the Eibishter himself. So this includes even this point that Hashem helps us through the means of nature. Even this itself, The Yidden will hope and daven and connect to the Eibishter himself without the intermediary. And not that the Eibishter holds them through nature, but directly to the Eibishter himself. Al derech, now this is similar, and the Rebbe emphasizes al derech, similar, because as we'll see in the continuation of the Sikhe, that here the Rebbe takes us to an even higher level. But this is similar, v'chsidis taichtem pasik, to what Chassidus explains in the pasuk that in Hallel that we say, that it says, Toiv lachses b'Hashem miptoyach b'adam. It's better to hope to the Eibishter than to place your trust in man. So what does this mean? It's better to hope to the Eibishter than to place your trust in man. Is move on. What do we understand from this? It doesn't say, similar to what it says before, cursed is the one that is placing his trust in man. Here it just says it's better. It's better to hope to Hashem than place your trust in man. Is move on, so it's understood as oich betoyach ba'adam, that over here when it talks about placing your trust in man, is mutter, is allowed, unaderech ba'anhage, and it's a way that a yid behaves, it's acceptable. Nor lachzes b'Hashem is better. But trusting in the Eibishter, relying on the Eibishter is even better than placing your trust in man. So what are these two levels? What does this mean? So it's explained in Chassidus, this is explained in Likutei Torah, as betoyach ba'adam meant, placing your trust in man means as follows. In dem Adam ha'elyon, it doesn't refer to placing your trust in another person here, human being in this world. Rather, it refers to the Adam Elyon, the supernal Adam, the Eibishter, B'chinas Memala Kalalman, the level that's known as Memala Kalalman, which means the level of godliness that's limited, that relates to our reality of existence. Was mitzat madreges memala kalalmen, this level of godliness which fills this world, darf sich a mensch mishtadel sein. So it's incumbent upon a person to make the effort of tzemachan akeli unevosh and darki ateva, to make that keli, a vessel or a garment in the ways of nature, and velachaz al sheire sein di birchas Hashem, and the brach of the Eibishter could dwell within this keli that you make within nature. This is the level of Mamala Kalalman. Mamala Kalalman relates to this existence of the world, this reality that we're in, and therefore, mitzad this level of godliness, it's necessary for a person to get the bracha from the Eibishter through the means of nature. Und der Rebbe, so now the pasuk says, is Toiv lachzis b'Hashem. It's better for a person to place his trust directly in the Eibishter, which is b'china Seiviv Kalalman, the level of Seiviv Kalalman. Was mitzad der madrege darf nicht sein die Ishtadlus and Darki Ateva. Seiviv Kalalman is the level of godliness that's unlimited, that's removed from the limitations of creation. So over here, it's not necessary for a person to make any effort through natural means. Norvahu yechal kalecha. The Eibishter is the one that will provide for you, or as the Rebbe teaches here, that Eibishter macht euch the keli. Chal kalecha it means also the keli, the vessel, or the effort that a person usually has to make in the ways of nature. That itself the Eibishter provides as well. There's nothing that the person has to do. He can ignore nature, walk away from the means of teva, and rely directly on the Eibishter himself. That's a higher level of bitachon that the pasuk says is even greater and better, so to speak, than the level of bitachon where a person is trusting in the Eibishter, but through the means of nature. But now, coming back to what it says here in the pasuk regarding what happens in the time period before the Geula, that a person will not hope to any man and will place his trust directly in the Eibishter himself. So the Rebbe will take this now to a higher level. Der tachlis hakavane is nicht as the anhagas hateva zal bottle werden. The ultimate purpose is not that nature should be totally annulled and negated. Nor adarabba, on the contrary, zu mevare sein und oifeibin the anhagas hateva. The purpose of creation is to refine and elevate nature itself. Bis as es soll sein goli lein kol as oich teva is miyuchen mit nebischen. Ultimately, the purpose is to reveal the true fact that what is nature itself? That nature itself is really one with the Eibishter. The fun is verstandig binyanenu. So therefore we can understand over here regarding what it says, the level of betachon that Yidden come to when we're arriving to that ultimate time of history, when the truth of the Eibishter is revealed in the world, as der pshat fun lo ish, when it says in the pasuk that in this time period we won't hope to any man, is nit as es wird bottle werden die hilf von dem ish. That doesn't mean that the assistance and the help that you get from a man or from any ways of nature will be totally annulled and destroyed and non-existent anymore. nor rather, as damod veteva gufe zayin betachlis ayichad mit elokusi yisbarach, rather that at this time period, nature itself will be completely unified with the Eibishter, bis as wir werden dem sehen, to the point that we will see the truth of what nature is, nit ezras ish, not that there's any assistance coming from a man or from any means of nature, nor blois ezras Hashem. What is nature in truth? The nature itself is really all one with the Eibishter himself. That's the chiddush of the pasuk over here of lo yikav ish. Now, just to clarify, this is different than the point that the Rebbe said before in the previous ayis, in the brackets, where the Rebbe pointed out that there is the betachin that a person has to realize that everything comes from Hashem and it comes through nature. The bracha of the Eibishter comes through nature, and that's the level of Mamala Kalaman. Or as the Rebbe already said it before, that the bracha comes from the Eibishter, but the teva is a keli and a levush. If the teva is a keli and a levush, that means that the teva is a certain metzias of a keli. That the teva has a certain significant existence, that it is a keli, and the Eibishter's bracha comes through this keli. This is a level of godliness that comes down and is limited and relates to this reality. It creates this reality and therefore relates to this reality, and therefore keli is a metzias for itself. And the bracha of the Eibishter comes through this metzias of teva. That's not what the Rebbe is speaking about here, revealing the level of mamala kalam within nature. Rather, revealing the essence of the Eibishter, where the teva, on one hand, exists, but on the other hand, the teva, it has no tfisas makim at all. The teva does not exist for itself at all, not even as a keli and a levush either. Rather, the teva is completely miyuchad with the Eibishter himself, as the Rebbe explains here now. In that minyan, so going back to the point that we said before, based on the pasuk of that the bracha of the Eibishter comes through nature, through Ashetase. So in dem inyan von Ashetase can sein zwei Yefanim. The interpretation of this Ashetase could be in two different ways. Aleph, one approach is yes, the person knows that teva, nature on its own, has absolutely no credibility. It doesn't exist for itself. Nature is created by the Eibishter, controlled every moment by the Eibishter, like a person that holds an axe and is banging with, is using with the axe. It's not cutting something with an axe. Who's doing it? The axe or the person? Of course, it's just the person. So over here, it's the Eibishter that's really controlling everything in nature. So that's the ashetasa, that the person, yes, is doing things in the ways of nature, but he's aware that it's really the Eibishter that's the source of the bracha. Von des wegen, however, in this approach, wie bald as der Eibishter hat geheißen, as es soll sein Tase, since the Eibishter has commanded that there should be the action done through nature, mizol machen a keli and derech ha-teva, to make that vessel through nature, von nem teva bei ihm en art. So the nature itself has a significance to it. The Eibishter creates it, and the Eibishter wants that things should come through this existence of teva. Takin nit mitzat teva alein. True, it's not any independent power that nature itself possesses. Aber mitzat sivya kadosh baruch hu bakumt teva chshivas in seine eigen. Because this is what Hashem commanded and desired. So Hashem desires to create a world that has a nature, has its own mitzias, and therefore the mitzias of the world has its chshivas. Allah b'ritzaini yizbarach. This is what Hashem has decided, and because of this Allah b'ritzaini yizbarach, there was a tzimtzum, and that tzimtzum limits Hashem's presence, so to speak. It conceals Hashem's presence, and there's a world that's limited that Hashem creates. And in this limited world, the world has an existence that's significant, that we have to pay attention to and connect to the Eibishter and get the bracha of the Eibishter through the limited existence of the world. That's one approach, and this is really the approach of Memala Kalalman that the Rebbe mentioned before. But however, there's a deeper pshat in the B'chol HaShatase. At Tutn Teva, when a person is doing what he has to in nature, nor weil der Eibishter hat so gesagt, only, exclusively, because this is what Hashem commanded him, es vernemt aber beim kein Ortnet. However, the nature absolutely has no significance whatsoever. What is this entire nature that exists? He doesn't view it as something as significant that exists, that Hashem wants this, and therefore now there's a tzimtzum, and the world has a credibility and has a significance. The whole entire existence of the world is all just an expression of the desire of Hashem. This is what Hashem wants. So nature itself is also something that's part of the fulfillment of Hashem's desire. There's absolutely no significance to the existence of nature for itself. So this Ashatase, the bracha of the Eibishter, through the Ashatase is one with the bracha of the Eibishter. There is no separate entity of Teva that takes up space in the person's focus and what he's doing. It's a whole completely different level. Das is the Bir and the Maimer Azal. This is the explanation of what the Gemara tells us, if in Pasuk V'hoye Emunas Itecha. And the Gemara there says that Pasuk Emunas Itecha is the source for the 6 different sections that there is in the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, as Emunas Zeh Seides Royim. Emunas, faith in Hashem, is the source for the existence of Seides Royim. The first section of the Mishnah is Zroyim, which talks about the halachas that apply to a person planting in a field. Why? What's the connection of Emunah, faith in Hashem, to Zroyim, to the halachas that apply to planting? Shemaimim, b'cheya ilamim v'zireya. Because a Yid has faith in Hashem and he goes ahead and plants. So this is very difficult to understand on the surface. Choch, das is an inyan tivi. This is a natural thing. As b'shas mezeit is mitzmiach. That when you plant, it grows. You don't have to have much faith for this. It doesn't matter who it is that's planting. Whether it's a Yid or a non-Jew. Or even a seed that fell into the ground without any activity of the person, it'll grow. His beteva from the air, latzmiach. This is within the nature of the soil that it grows. Unachmer, even more, the teva is nikva gvaran in the erd and anayfen. This nature is here. It's established within the soil and with the earth in such a degree. V'yeshteit zera v'kotzer goyim lo yishboisu. The Rebbe should promise that this is a nature that will never cease to function. If so, what does this mean? That a person is sort of doubtful whether his planting will have any effect, whether it will grow or not, and he has to have a special faith in Hashem that it will grow. So the pshat is, like we said before, von deswegen, and nevertheless, you have this nature, and this nature itself is so powerful, but yet, noch dem allem, and after all of this, bakumt nit die teva kein chshivus v'tfisis makim ba'yidin. The teva itself, nature itself, has no significance, takes up no place in the mind of a yid when he does his actions and his ishtadlus, his effort within nature. Und wenn is Reiya, tut das nicht, weil al piteva wird Zriya bringen at smiche. And when he goes ahead and plants, he's not doing this only because he knows that nature will bring about that it will grow. Nor blois, weil is maimim b'chaya ilamim. He's simply planting only because he believes in Hashem. The far is Reiya. This is the way Hashem designed it. This is what Hashem wants. So therefore, this is what I do. But not that nature itself takes up any space. That nature itself has any koyach at all. That's the taich of the lashon of Chazal, Maimim b'chaylamim v'zereya. So again, this is, you may think that when it says Maimim b'chaylamim v'zereya, this lashon of Chazal could be interpreted similar to what the Rebbe said before, that of course a person knows that whatever he's doing in Teva is just a keli, but the bracha comes from Hashem. And that's what Chazal is saying, Maimim b'chaylamim v'zereya, that he realizes that the zriya, the planting, is just a keli, and it's really the bracha of the Eibishter that's the source of the bracha. But here the Rebbe is teaching on a much deeper level. Maimim b'chayalamim. Maimim b'chayalamim is not just that the bracha of the teva comes from the Eibishter. Maimim b'chayalamim. He believes that it's all the Eibishter. It's just belief in Hashem. And that's the only reason why Zereya. That's what you see here in this lashon of Chazal. It starts off with, it doesn't say Zereya, and then he realizes that the bracha comes from Hashem. Maimim b'chayalamim. He has full belief in Hashem, and that's it. That's the only thing, and that is the only reason why Zereya. So the Teva has absolutely no credibility whatsoever. The Teva is one with Hashem. So that's the Chiddush over here. On this level of Bitachin, we're talking about Bitachin, which on one hand does not negate nature at all. He makes all the effort within nature. But yet, what is the true Metzius of nature? It's just an expression of Ratzon Hashem. It's the Eibishter himself. So basically, based on what we learned until here, we can see that there are 3 different approaches in a person's bitachon. One is based on the Malak Kalalman, where he sees Teva as being significant as a keli and as a levush for Hashem's bracha. And then there's the level of bitachon which comes from Soviv Kalalman, where a person throws away, throws away the ways of nature, and he's just placing his trust completely in Hashem. And then there's the highest level, which is at the time of the Gola, when a person makes the effort within the ways of nature, but the nature itself is completely unified with the Eibishter himself. This is the Ratzon Hashem, and therefore nature itself is one with the Eibishter. It's not a separate thing. Okay, let's continue. Der Chiluk zwischen die zwei Eiden Geretta and Hagis, the difference between these two approaches here, is nit blois beoifen u behergish midas habitachon. It's not just regarding the feeling or the approach of the bitachon that the person has. No, der fun vet euch ne stalshel a chiluk u beanhage bepoyel le machshave dibur meiser. From this, it also evolves and it comes down. It trickles down into the actual behavior in bepoyel, how a person does things when it comes to a certain challenge, when he has to do things in a natural means. B'shas der ashetase is by im ametzias for sich. When a person sees the effort that he's making, the actions that he's doing in nature, as something that's significant. Teva fanem beim banart. Nature is something that takes up a place in his mind. Dan zene bei im der Tase und Teiro mitzvahs zwei besondere inyanim. So the Tase, the things that he does in nature, and the Teiro mitzvahs that he fulfills in this world are two separate things. And if so, und wenn es kommt zu a stire zwischen Teiro und mitzvahs und die Esaskes und Darkei Teva, when you have a collision of these two, when there's some kind of contradiction here between dedicating your time now for learning or doing a mitzvah, or to go and be occupied with the ways of nature, and the Rabbi gives a very simple and practical example. A person is davening and he thinks to himself that if I'm going to take another few minutes and I'm going to continue davening here, I may miss an opportunity to meet someone or to get some kind of relationship, and therefore I will lose out in my business. Or a person might say to himself, if I'll be giving tzedakah extra, more than is necessary, so I won't have the money that I want for myself to invest in my business. Or any other time when you have sort of this contradiction between doing a mitzvah or instead investing in your business. So now this becomes a very, very big battle here. This is very difficult to deal with. Is das bei ihm because in this person's mind, Teiro mitzvahs is the Eibishter. Teva is a significant existence for itself. So these are two separate things. So now this becomes a huge battle in his heart. So even if he will forgo that opportunity that he could have in nature, Wissendig, because he will in the end convince himself and know the truth, as birchas avaye hi tashe, that the bracha comes from the Eibishter. The Eibishter is the one that makes us rich. Und darki hateva zen blois akeli und levushtu birchas Hashem. And whatever ways of nature is just a vessel and is just a garment to draw down the blessing of the Eibishter. It's not the source of the bracha. Und tot in Torah and mitzvahs, and therefore he will take the time to add more Torah and more mitzvahs. Is das alles in an Eufen von Mulchame und his Gabris of the Nefesh Bahamas. But nevertheless, this will be a battle, and he'll have to have tremendous kayach to fight against all of these ideas that are in his head that nature is something that's significant. I have to pay attention to this, because the bitachon, the level of bitachon that this person is on is a bitachon of the Eibishter through the ways of nature. And nature is a significant entity that's separate from Torah mitzvahs. Und es bleibt allemal die Möglichkeit, and there is always the possibility that in this battle that he has with himself, that the conclusion should be the opposite, chas v'shalom, God forbid, as the tzadam menaged zal geive sein, that the opposite side should be stronger and he should be pulled into doing things in his parnasa away from a mitzvah. This is when a person has this level of bitachon, and we're speaking of here about bitachon. Bitachon at the Eibishter, that the bracha comes only from the Eibishter through nature. And since it comes through nature, nature itself has a significance. But if the level of the tasa, the effort that he does within nature, takes up absolutely no space by him whatsoever, it's being done simply because this is what Hashem wants from me. Is by him does gufe aneni von avedis Hashem. So his time that he gives for his investment in his parnasa and the ways of nature is part of his serving the Eibishter, fulfilling Hashem's will. By him is the v'chol masecha and v'chol drachecha. Your ways and your actions that you do, nita bazun zach von the Shem Shemayim, not something separate from the sake of heaven for the Eibishter's sake. und der Eyu and the knowledge of Hashem in these things. Nor sie sind durchgedrungen mit l'shem shemayim and der Eyu bis es kol echad. This is what it is. This identifies these actions. All he's doing is he's occupying himself with things that are for the sake of heaven, with the knowledge of Hashem. Because this is what Hashem wants. Nature itself is an expression of the will of Hashem. Und wie bald bei ihm ist nicht doch kein Metzies außer dem Ratzen Elyon. So if here there's nothing that exists in this person's life other than the will of Hashem, and even nature is all part of the will of Hashem, ist verstandig, als ein Mitzvah kann es sein bestiert zu einer zweiten Mitzvah. So if right now I'm busy doing one mitzvah, how could the things that I would do in Parnasa, that's also part of the will of Hashem, come and stop me from doing the mitzvah that I'm doing right now? One is not a contradiction to the other. Nor adarabah, mitzvah, geredes mitzvah. One mitzvah brings another mitzvah. And same over here. He may be changing the scenery or the place that he's in, whether he's in the shul davening or whether he's going out into the street and doing business, but it's all the same thing. His mind is focused on Ratzon Hashem. It is all Ratzon Hashem. There's nothing else. Der Chiluk zwischen die zwei Anhages häupt sich nicht an in einem offenen Peil Mamish. This distinction described here, that it could actually trickle down and there could be an actual difference in the behavior of a person, these two approaches in B'tachon, it doesn't always begin so practically where actually this distinction is so obvious that you see this difference. As the Yetzer Hara soll melchatchila kommen, einreden, a Yidden, soll chas v'shalom oive seine von Ratzon Elyon, where the Yetzer Hara can come to a Yid right at the beginning and tell him that here you have a mitzvah, drop the mitzvah and go instead and take care of your parnasa and do the things that you have to do according to nature. Yetzer Hara doesn't come to a person right at the beginning and tell him to do something which is against the Ratzon of Hashem. Nor von achut asayda. It begins from a hairbreadth, from a little tiny thing that the Yetzer Hara comes and pulls a person. Hayoim ba'aschala, today, in the beginning, is the Yetzer Hara koloimish maskim, as the Isaskus and Darkei Teva, tornet zayin bestiret sulkiyim atayre mitzvahs. In the beginning, the Yetzer Hara, so to speak, is agreeing. He's agreeing that whatever you do in your parnasa in nature can't be a contradiction to Torah mitzvahs. And as not madgish, however, he places this thought into your mind. He emphasizes for you, as Torah gitanot chshivas teva. But don't forget, Torah itself says that teva has a significance. Teva is also in existence that you have to pay attention to. But then eventually tomorrow, sof machter di darkei teva far niker. Eventually he comes to the person and slowly but surely he brings the thought into his mind that the ways of nature is the main focus and the main thing that you should be occupied with. In the Maimah. This is based here on the pshat that the Friediger Rebbe said and what the Gemara tells us. This is the way the Yetzer Hara works, his profession. First he tells you, do this. Now what does hasei kach mean? I mean, the conclusion of the Maimah Chazal is that Rebbe brings at the end of the paragraph, and then until he tells you, lech aved aved zara. So in the beginning, when he tells you asay kach, what is this kach referring to? The Yetzer Hara hypt nicht an, einzureden a Yidden, soll ton verkehrt von sein Ratzon amiti. He doesn't come and tell a person to do something that's the opposite of his true intrinsic nature. He knows that the Yid won't listen. And oive sein chas v'shalom von Ratzon Elyon to go against the will of Hashem. Adarabah. Actually, on the contrary, zoktim asay kach. What does the kach mean? Is maskim as the Yid zol mekayim sein Torah mitzvahs. Before the Yetzer Hara comes to a Yid, what is the Yid doing? Torah and mitzvahs. So when the Gemara says say kach, he's telling him, do this that you're actually doing now, continue doing this. But what happens though, is in Masber v'es haltois al piseichel from nefesh bahamis v'hayetzer. But he just throws a thought into his mind that the mitzvah that you're doing, there's a benefit for you in this, even the Yetzer Hara likes this, the nefesh bahamis also gains from the mitzvah. So do the mitzvah, but do it also and mix in a certain thought of your ego and your selfishness that you're gaining something out of the mitzvah. So he mixes in the person that he should feel himself, what he's gaining through this mitzvah. Und is a margel, as darf in dem haben sein, the Yetzer Hara's askame. And he slowly but surely gets you accustomed to the fact that every time you do a mitzvah, you think to yourself, what isn't this for me? And you sort of need the Yetzer Hara's agreement to do the mitzvah. And if you see nothing in it for you to do the mitzvah purely for Hashem's sake, because this is what Hashem wants of me. So the Yetzer Hara slowly gets a person used to this, that such a mitzvah doesn't interest him. The firiter, eventually Yitzhara can take a person off as lamachar oimechulu at sheimel avodah v'dezara, and then he can take him to the point where he chas v'shalom completely rebel against Hashem, serving avodah zara. And similar happens over here regarding this individual that is slowly going away from the ultimate bitachon, realizing that everything, including nature, is part of Hashem and it's all the ratzon Hashem. And slowly, once the nature has significance, he slowly takes him away. Und der Rebbe is der Weg zu bewahren in sich gedebei von Tachbulas Yitzhara. So therefore, how does one be careful? What do you do in order to be careful properly to not get drawn into the schemes of the Yitzhara? Nit durch an Aveda al pitam v'das. This is not when a person serves the Eibishter in a very reasonable manner, where a person is thinking on his own with his seichel. Val tam v'das git an art for the mitzias von teva. Because then when a person is just only limited to using his seichel, when I understand, when I relate, when I appreciate, then, and based on what my appreciation, then I serve the Eibishter, so that is actually the source of a person having the same approach to nature. Since the Torah itself tells me that nature is important, so therefore that means that nature has significance to it. No, rather, durch bittel umesiris nefesh zum ratzon elyon. When a person has total and self-nullification and total self-sacrifice to the will of Hashem, putting his thinking, his own seichel aside, and completely mevatl himself to the Eibishter, l'mayla mitam v'das, beyond what his reason and logic could take him to. So then there's nothing other than the will of Hashem. So then that will reflect itself also in the approach that the person has to nature. That what is nature itself has no significance. Nature is part of Hashem's will, that things should come in through the ways of nature. Going back again to what the Rebbe brought before from Likutei Torah, me'en val derech, somewhat similar to the demchiluk hanal siv gimel zwischen lachses b'Hashem und betoyach ba'adam. When a person places his trust only in Hashem, and the person that is betoyach ba'adam, as we learned before, Adam refers to Adam Elyon. Mitzad b'chinas betoyach ba'adam, when a person trusts in the level of Adam, which is memala kol almen, the level of godliness that creates this world, that relates to the existence of this world. Vos dugmas b'avedas Adam is an aveda al pitam v'das. So this is in a person's aveda, in his connection to Hashem. Since a person's connecting to Hashem with his understanding, so how far does a person's understanding reach in the levels of godliness and connecting to Hashem? As far as the limited human being could understand godliness, which is a limited level of godliness. Memala kol almen. Dav zayin di ishtadlus and darki ateva. So here, this kind of aveda will require of a person that he should make his hishtadlus, he should do what's necessary in the ways of nature. This level of connecting to Hashem, nature definitely is significant. Even the level of a lakus that is giving the vitality, the existence of the teva, says that the teva is significant. That's what Mamala Kalama means. It's a level of godliness that relates to this mitzias that it's creating. That's all an Aveda, which is based on a person approaching and connecting to Hashem with his own seichel. When a person places his trust in the level of Avaya, which is Bechina Seiviv Kalaman, a level of godliness which is unlimited. When a person puts himself completely aside on a level which is higher than his reason and logic, so here the ways of nature have they have no significance whatsoever. Und der Rebbe is the Seder v'hu yechal kalecha. So therefore the Eibishter himself is the one that makes the keli of teva itself. As an atakefaran kelim. But over here, we're teaching that what this means is not that there are no kelim. V'hu yechal kalecha means there are kelim of teva. Or b'zei kumim ulmayla. But you recognize what these kelim really are. The ways of nature are all really from the Eibishter himself. Al derech v'geret frier, as we've explained before, as oich when the mensch tut b'darkei teva. Even when a person is doing things through the means of nature, zenen ze bayim kein mitzias nit. While he's occupied in the ways of nature, but he doesn't give any credibility to nature whatsoever. Bis is nitshayach zagen as is da ezra sish. There's no assistance. There's nothing that he's getting from nature. Because the nature itself is completely one with the Eibishter himself. Das is was der Achane zu der Geule is leikavele ishkaimer. So this is this unique level of bitachon, which is the preparation for the Geule, and that time period. This is we didn't come to this high level of bitachon. Demold wird man in ganzen arabnehmen dem Helen vehester von Teva. In that time period, Hashem will completely remove this aspect of nature that conceals its true existence. We'll see physically with our physical eyes what Teva itself is. Teva is really godliness. Und der Rebbe wird dann sein, der Seder ketalmeis Hashem geimer, that will realize that everything is like the dew that comes directly from Hashem. Lo yekave leish v'lo yeyachel of neyadam, not to hope or think of any ways of nature, any person that can come and help you. Al derech v'hu yichal kalecha. As we explained there, v'hu yichal kalecha means that the keli of Teva itself is v'hu, is the Eibishter. And this Aveda, as the Rebbe explained there, is accomplished through this tremendous bittul l'mayla mitam v'das, when you're focused completely only on the Ratzon of Hashem. So therefore even nature itself is part of the Ratzon Hashem. Al pikon alav verstehen die Sheiches von der Haftarah to see in Parshas Balak. Based on all of this, we could see the connection of the subject of the Haftarah to the end of Parshas Balak. V'es wird erzählt wegen dem Chet von Baal Peor. There tells us the story about the Yidden that sinned with the Avodah Zarah of Baal Peor. Und wie der Mesiris Nefesh from Pinchas hat Chet Mesaken gewen. And the story that happened that the Yidden then served Avodah Zarah, and they also had forbidden relationships with the non-Jewish women. And Pinchas came along to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, isn't the halacha, haboyal aramis kanon poigim bay, that when one has a forbidden relationship with an aramis, with a guy, so then a kanaya zealot may come and kill him at the time of the action. And the Eibusha tells, or rather Moshe Rabbeinu tells Pinchas that he should go ahead and take action. And the Gemara describes that he put his life in danger and had Mesiris Nefesh to do what he had to. And this brought to Takana, this brought to Kapara, this brought to Kapara to the Yidden, the Mesiris Nefesh of Pinchas. As is Mavur in Chassidus. So what is this Avodah Zarah of Baal Peor when they bow down or they serve this idol of Peor? What is this Avodah Zarah of Peor? As the Sheirish from Chet Baal Peor, the source, the root from what this Avodah Zarah of Baal Peor is as follows. Now, simply, as Rashi here says, that the Baal Peor is Shepoir in Chulu U'Meitzi in Rei V'Zui Avidasei. This was an Avodah Zarah, strange Avodah Zarah. They would relieve themselves in front of this Avodah Zarah, and this was the way they served it. Seemingly embarrassing, most embarrassing act, but yet this was the way they served this Avodah Zarah. What's the source of this concept? Beruchnis, what does this kind of Avodah Zarah represent? So it says in Chassidus, as das is was megitach shivis to tanugim gashmiyim. When a person overindulges into physical things and the physical pleasures of the world, so this is a person that is paying too much attention to things that are really just waste. The pleasures that we see here in this world, in the physical pleasures of the world, what are they? They're really just the psailes, the waste of the malachim above, the real source of the ruchnis, the pleasure of the malachim, and higher. So therefore, a person that indulges in the pleasures of the world is this Avodah Zarah, is a person that's relieving himself for this Avodah Zarah, and he takes pleasure in this. Wie kommt es, als man soll machen an Iker von Tanugim Gashmiyim psailes? Now, to take this a step further, what's really the root of this? Where does this come from that a Yid gives extra attention and a Yid gets drawn into the pleasures of the world, of the Gashmias of the world? So here the Rebbe gives a unique answer to this. You might think, well, the simple answer is a person likes to feel good, and a person feels good in the pleasures of the world, and at the moment he feels good about it, if even afterwards he realizes that it's destructive and he overindulged, but the person feels good about it, so he gets schlepped into it. But there's something much deeper here in the perspective of a person that brings you to this. Really, the ultimate source of this is when in the person's mind, the ways of nature, the existence of nature is something which is significant in his eyes. If nature and the world and the Gashmias has its own significant existence, so then, so this could eventually lead to this, that first it's in the head, that nature is significant in your eyes, and therefore you give extra credibility to it, and you invest in it in the parnasa. And then, if nature is something which is independent and its existence is significant, so then a person then ends up indulging into the things in the world as well, into the Gashmias. Damit is euch moving the Maimah Chazal, Benegeya Kapore von Chet Baal Pa'or. With this we can understand what the Medrash tells us regarding the Kapore, the atonement for this Avera of Baal Pa'or, as Ad Achshav Lezaz, until today, Moshe Rabbeinu does not budge away from this place, and he stands and brings about a kapara for this chet of Baal Pa'or until the time of Tchiyas HaMesim. Why? Why is this something which is ongoing throughout history? Now that we understand what really the root cause of this Avodah Zarah is, it's not just what it is physically, that they relieve themselves in front of this Avodah Zarah, some kind of a strange Avodah Zarah. And it's not even only the concept of Tanugim Gashmim, where a person indulges in Gashmims, but it's really the root of this all. The fact that a person b'chlal gives any significance to the existence of nature as separate from the Eibishter. This is something which will only be fully rectified, and the kapara for this comes only fully when Mashiach comes. When there will be the ultimate refinement of nature, and will fully recognize what nature is, that nature itself is unified with the Eibishter. Only then, at that time period, will there not be any possibility to create any focus on Gashmias and indulging into Gashmias. So this is something that we work on throughout history until the time that Mashiach comes. So here, as we can see, the whole focus of this week's parsha is, in this chet of Baal Pa'or, is the fact that the Yidden gave a credibility and a significance to the existence of Teva and Gashmias. Und der Rebbe kommt die Kapara durch den Mesiris Nefesh von Pinchas. So the Kapara for this comes through Mesiris Nefesh, and the Mesiris Nefesh that Pinchas expressed at that time. This is a level of Mesiris Nefesh that even if you ask whether you can do this, we don't tell you to do so. This is something you have to choose on your own. It comes from a very deep place. And even this level of Mesiris Nefesh doesn't scare Pinchas, and he goes forward and he gave over his life. He had this level of self-sacrifice. This lifts a person up to a level of Mesiris Nefesh even more than the Torah itself requires, than Seichel al Pi Torah requires a person to do. As we mentioned before, as dafke, durch bittel, l'mayla mitam v'das, and afila from Kedusha, only when a person nullifies himself completely to Hashem, and even higher than the level of thinking and understanding things that are in the world of Kedusha itself. Only then could you be fully careful and know for sure not to have any separation between the existence and the significance of nature and godliness. Torah itself requires that a person should take action within nature, but yet, if a person is completely bottled to the Ratzon of Hashem, so then he has the attitude that what is nature? Nature itself is completely one with the Ratzon of the Eibishter. So too over here, we could see this in the story of this week's parasha. This is the connection of the theme of the Haftarah, talking about the right approach to what nature really is, that it's really all just an expression of the Ratzon Hashem. It's the same thing over here. The Haftarah, the end of the parasha speaks about the chet of Baal Pa'or, which comes from this, that a person sees nature as significant for itself, and the kapara for Baal Pa'or is this ultimate Mesiris Nefesh, the bittul, the absolute self-nullification to the will of Hashem. Move on with this, we also understand the shaychus von Inyan Anal to the Knesset Eretz Yisrael, the connection of this subject here to the time period in the parsha when Yidden were about to enter Eretz Yisrael. Was gar kora to the Zman HaKnesses and given the Miroz from Parshas Balak and Alsif Beis, which this all happens very close to this time when Yidden are about to enter into Eretz Yisrael. In Midbar is given the man. What's the difference between the Yidden when they were in the Midbar and when they entered into Eretz Yisrael? In the Midbar, the Yidden had the man, Anhagen Nisis, all the miraculous behavior, v'us nitshayach given zu machen at Tos, as meise ben Yadam kennen dem epis oiftan. There's no mistake that a person could make that it's his actions, that it's him, he does something according to nature that will accomplish anything. Even if you tried to collect extra man, or you collected less than what you were supposed to, everyone got the same amount of man. Und der man is given not of dem Tag, the man that they received was for that day alone. Is that gemust zayin betochen gamor dvayim b'yayim. They had absolute betochen in Hashem every single day, that Hashem is providing for me what I need today, and there's nothing to worry about when it comes to tomorrow. Tomorrow Hashem gives me again. In Hashem Yisbarach, all the betochen in Hashem. What happens when Yidden enter into Eretz Yisrael? When it's Hatzachon they say that Avodah von Eretz Nishavas. Here they enter into a settled land. Hat man gedacht, frie bavaren in dem Inyan from Baal Pa'er. So here, entering into a settled land where you do have to work according to the laws of nature. So here, this Avodah Zarah of Baal Pa'er, the Yidden have to overcome and have to bring about a kapara for this Avodah Zarah of Baal Pa'er as chach, as hoipzuchan, as seid al piteva. That even though now there's going to be a tremendous change in their whole approach, and here they are going to have to do things according to nature, even here, within nature itself, they also should realize that they're not hoping and they're not placing any significance to the existence of ish, of any human being or nature in general. Nature is not an existence for itself. Even when you are within nature, you have the exact same betochen as the Yidden have in the Midbar. It's one thing to have the betochen of the Eibusher that nature is insignificant when Hashem is providing for you everything miraculously. So you see everything comes directly from the Eibusher. But to be in nature itself and yet to realize what the true existence of nature is, that it's really all an expression of the Ratzon of the Eibusher, sort of two opposites at the same time, that's the true chiddush of what happens when Yidden are entering into Eretz Yisrael. And ultimately, in the time of the Haschal of the Geula, the Pasuk says Yidden will come and see the true existence of what nature is, this unique level of betachon. Das ist eigentlich der Ra in der letzte Tag von Zman HaGolus, wenn wir gerät sich zu der Knesset Eretz Yisrael, al yedei Mashiach Tzidkeinu. This is our lesson for us today, in the last moments of Geula, when we're preparing to enter into Eretz Yisrael through Mashiach. Although we're still in the time of a double darkness, in the time of Golus, Hepech von Aschalta de Geula, totally the opposite of any beginning of a redemption. We see this clearly. Von deswegen, nevertheless, we bald alle in Yonah von Lasad Lava is an entolib Maseneva with the Senate calls man Meshach HaGolus. Everything that happens when Mashiach comes, all those revelations are dependent on our Aveda that we do today, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya. And more specifically in our generation, when we are preparing the very last preparations for the arrival of Mashiach. As the Vart that the Friediger Rebbe said, as Mashiach is Oymed Acha Keslenu, Mashiach is standing right on the other side of the wall. The walls of the Galus are already on fire and Mashiach is about to arrive. So at this time, it's demanded of everyone to have somewhat of this Aveda, of not to hope, not to place any significance in nature whatsoever. In the Aveda of every Yid, as the ways of nature should have absolutely no significance in your eyes. Und der Betochen darf sein, not in the Eibusher. And the Betochen, even while you're doing things within the ways of nature, should be only in the Eibusher himself. Und durch dem wird jeder Nigal von Deiges, von Yonam HaMevalvelim. This will bring everybody a personal redemption of his worries and of things that are disturbing him. Because if you're doing things within nature, the action that you take, only because you're simply fulfilling the will of Hashem, is menitared in them, so you don't get caught up by this, you don't get preoccupied by this and disturbed by this. The only thing that matters to him is that he's fulfilling the will of Hashem. So things are clear and simple and beautiful. On the Geula Pratis, so coming from this personal redemption, that's accomplished by every individual, is Oich the Achane Keli to the Geula Klalis. This is the preparation and the Keli for the ultimate and general redemption al Yidei Mashiach Tzidkeinu, bis to the Yom Shekuli Shabbos U'Menucha L'Chaye Yoilamim, to the day that will be a day of Shabbos and peace and tranquility to the Eibusher, to the one that lives forever.